This is a MonsterVerse Godzilla. This is a MonsterVerse Godzilla. And this is, oh yeah, that's right. We have no idea what this is. That's because we're going back to feudal Japan for today's prompt. So let's get started. There are lots of ways to take a modern monster and drop them into history. You could just plop them down in the middle of the action and see what happens. But if you want to make something special, it helps to establish context. That way you can better understand how people would react to your monster, how they would explain its existence, and even how they might fight it. For example, imagine you decided to put the xenomorph from Alien in feudal Japan. In this scenario, you could simply drop the xenomorph into ancient Japan and we'd get some pretty fun stuff. The samurai wouldn't stand a chance against its power and weaponry. They'd probably assume it was a demon sent to punish them. And the xenomorph would probably kill a lot of people before anyone came up with a plan to stop it. But you could also choose to place the xenomorph within the context of Japanese folklore. There are all kinds of yokai in Japanese mythology, many of which are incredibly dangerous monsters. There are all kinds of stories about ogres, demons, and other terrifying beasts. So instead of dropping the xenomorph in the middle of a battle between two rival clans, or during a routine patrol in the countryside, why not set the story during a pilgrimage to a remote mountain temple? Maybe there's an ancient evil sealed beneath the mountain that has been slumbering for centuries until a careless monk accidentally awakens it. Now your story is more than just a monster movie. It's a horror movie. And the xenomorph itself becomes a lot more terrifying when it's clear that it isn't just killing people for sport. It's trying to spread its eggs and corrupt as much of Japan as possible. Now, some of you might be thinking, duh, but a lot of big-budget movies don't bother with this kind of world building. But taking the time to learn about the setting you're writing about can really pay off. It makes the monster feel more at home in the world you've created, and it gives you a better idea of how people would respond to the monster. If you're going to write a story about a monster in ancient Japan, then you should probably learn something about ancient Japan. So let's talk about Godzilla. What kind of monster is he? Well, that depends on which version of Godzilla you're talking about. In the original 1954 film, he's an enormous radioactive lizard that rampages through Tokyo. He's the result of nuclear testing in the Pacific Ocean. His very existence is a metaphor for the dangers of atomic weapons. In later films, his origins were changed so that he's an ancient monster who sleeps beneath the ocean. Every once in a while, though, he'll awaken and go on a rampage, usually because some humans disturbed him. Over the years, he's become less of a metaphor and more of a force of nature. Think of something like a tsunami or a hurricane. People aren't directly responsible for his rampages, but they often make things worse when they try to stop him. So how would people in ancient Japan react to Godzilla? Well, that depends on what he's like. Is he a huge destructive lizard made of radioactive space goo? Or is he a gigantic mystical beast that occasionally emerges from the sea? Does he breathe atomic fire or does he use some kind of magic? Depending on your answer, you'll need to do some different research. Either way, you want to know a little bit about the geography of Japan. When did people start living on the islands? How did they travel from place to place? How did they farm and hunt? This will help you decide where your story takes place and how people react to Godzilla's presence. But you should also think about Japanese religion. Shintoism is the dominant religion in Japan, and it's based around respecting nature and the spirits that inhabit it. There are all kinds of local deities in Shintoism, and they're often associated with specific places. There are gods of the mountains, gods of the rivers, and even gods of the crops. A lot of these deities have animal forms. Some are foxes, some are wolves, and some are giant birds. But you'll also find stories of terrible monsters in Japanese mythology. There are ogres and demons and all kinds of other creatures that are a lot like Godzilla. And speaking of stories, it's worth checking out some classic Japanese literature. The Tale of the Bamboo Cutter tells the story of a princess who comes down from the heavens and falls in love with a mortal man. Well, the Pillow Book is basically just a collection of random thoughts and observations written by a court lady. Both of these stories take place in an idealized version of ancient Japan, but they can still teach you a lot about the culture. I mentioned earlier that the xenomorph would feel more at home in a period piece if you use Japanese folklore as a backdrop for it. The same thing goes for Godzilla. He's already a mythical creature in the modern Toho films, so it shouldn't be too hard to drop him into an earlier time period. Just remember that he's supposed to be an ancient monster who has been slumbering beneath the sea for centuries. He's not an alien from outer space. Now, if you're writing a story about Godzilla, you might want to give him a backstory. Where did he come from? Why is he destroying Japan? How is he related to the other monsters in Japanese mythology? These are all good questions, and you should probably have some answers for them before you start writing. Otherwise, you'll end up with something that's a little too close to the modern Godzilla. One thing you can do is look at the different versions of Godzilla and see which one you like the most. Do you prefer the original 1954 film or the more recent Shin Godzilla? Maybe you like the goofy kaiju films of the 60s and 70s? Once you've got a good idea of what kind of Godzilla you're working with, you can start thinking about how people would react to him. How would they explain his existence? Would they believe he's a god? A demon? A human? Who do you think would be the first to encounter Godzilla? A hermit monk living deep in the mountains? A fisherman out on the sea? A young samurai on his way to a mission? Your answer will depend on the tone of the story you want to tell. A hermit monk would lead to a very different story than a young samurai. And finally, how would people fight Godzilla? This is a tough one. In the modern day, people use giant robots to fight Godzilla. But that technology didn't exist in feudal Japan. People would have to rely on their wits, their courage, and their martial arts skills. Maybe they could build some kind of trap to catch Godzilla. Maybe they could use magic to defeat him. Or maybe they would simply run away from the monster and hide in the mountains. If you're writing a story about Godzilla, you should probably have a plan for how people would react to him. Are they scared? Are they curious? Are they indifferent? How do they explain his existence? And finally, how do they stop him? So those are a few things to keep in mind when writing about Godzilla in feudal Japan. Take your time, do your research, and have fun. Thanks for watching. If humans can't kill it, then what can? If humanity has failed to stop the Titans from rampaging across the globe, what could actually end them? What would it take? This is the channel. Join me for big ideas about big monsters, and today we are going to try and answer this question. Let's get into it.